Modesty isn't just about your clothes, it's about how you talk and how you behave. Modesty, in simple terms, means keeping within measure. So anything that forces you to go out of your way to show others what you are capable of, or your body or anything of your speech, is immodest. You want to be a baddie, but you also want to be a Christian. There's now this cognitive dissonance because now you want to be seen as something else, but you also want to be treated as something different from what you're presenting. So what happens is that you are showing yourself as something, but you're completely denying what you're showing yourself to be. So that is where the cognitive dissonance comes in. We cannot try to differentiate our inner selves from our outer selves. What is in on the inside of you, those pain and those things will always show and reveal themselves one way or the other. And if you have peace and you have love and all these things, it will always reflect, because your inner self and your outer self are one thing. Hi everyone, my name is Pakuti. Thank you for tuning into my channel. Here we talk about how our childhood experiences affect our livelihood and thus impacting our mental health, creating a need for us to change the way we think, based on Romans chapter 12 verse 2, which says, "Do not conform to the patterns of the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, testing every good and perfect will of God." So today we're going to talk about modesty. I wanted to talk about this because I see that most of the time when people talk about modesty, it's, don't wear this, don't wear that. And they don't go into the depths of why do people wear that? Why do we actually find ourselves wearing like that? And what is really wrong with wearing like that? It's more of a judgment thing rather than, oh, this is actually what's happening in your mind and in your heart. So when I thought about this concept, I thought modesty, and all of a sudden this thought came. It's not what you wear or reveal that makes you immodest. It's the bruise on your heart that is begging to be healed, and it's not receiving it, so it starts exposing its pain. And when I thought about that, I was like, that is a very interesting thing. And immediately I thought of a saying that I always say to myself: I want people to see God in me and not me in God. Simply what I'm saying is that I want God to precede me. When you see me, I want you to see the presence of God, because that's who lives within me. But I don't want you to see me, then see God, because that means I am ruling over my life, and that's not true. Now I want to precaution this by saying, modesty isn't just about your clothes. It's about how you talk and how you behave. Modesty, in simple terms, means keeping within measure. So anything that forces you to go out of your way to show others what you are capable of, or your body or anything of your speech, is immodest. In psychology, we have this term called a salient trait, which means whatever is most visually prominent becomes what the brain focuses on. So whatever you present unto people and you make it higher or you make it bigger is what people will see from you. So this brings us to that saying that says first impressions count. However you look is however people are going to perceive you and judge you and create an opinion about you. And that is different yet almost similar to every person. Why? Because the human subconscious is able to find patterns within every other person and group them according to the same things that they do, and then creates its own opinion. So you cannot control someone's opinion about you, because that's how their subconscious is made. So whether you like it or not, our appearance will always say something to people before we could even say something. So this has to mean we have to be extremely cautious of how we present ourselves, because whether you want to or not, people will make a definitive judgment about you. That means every single person is responsible of how they decide to broadcast themselves towards others. In Matthew chapter 3 verse 4, we read that John himself was clothed in camel's hair with a leather belt around his waist, and his food was locusts and wild honey. This wasn't a random fashion choice that John made. Every prophet, if you read it in the Old Testament, you will see that this is kind of the outfits that they would wear. So even before John could come to the people and speak to them, they already knew he was a prophet of God just through his apparel. This brings me to something I actually realized. A person will wear baddie outfits, right? And so they want to wear the extravagant clothes, the flashy clothes, show some skin, all these things. But then they will say, but I'm a Christian, but I'm a follower of God. And it brings us back to that beginning statement I made. As a Christian, whereas God, people have to see God in me, not me in God. When you were a certain way, then you are now in God. you're now doing the opposite of what a Christian should do. When usually I see people who do this, they'll say, well, it's my body, my rules, and so I have to have that within me. And it's like, that is true. You have autonomy over your body, but you do not have autonomy over other people's opinions and how others treat you. God didn't say we should be modest because he didn't want us to have autonomy. He wanted for you to be distinct and to also protect us as a father does. So what happens is that now, because you want to be a baddie, but you also want to be a Christian, there's now this cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance just means a discomfort within the way you think, because now you want to be seen as something else, but you also want to be treated as something different from what you are presenting. So what happens is that you are showing yourself as something, but you're completely denying what you're showing yourself to be. So that is where the cognitive dissonance comes in. What we wear is actually a uniform without realizing it. I want you to think about this. If I go out to a store and I see a certain thing, right, and I think, oh wow, this is such a beautiful thing, I like this very much, and a person who is worldly comes into the same store and sees the same thing and says, wow, that is beautiful, I like that. You guys have similar traits and you guys have a similar vision and belief because you found the same thing attractive. So whether you like it or not, you cannot other yourself from the other person because you have found a common belief. And when you both wear those things, people are going to see you as the same. They will not differentiate the other and say, oh, well, but this one is worldly and this one is Christian, because you have decided to wear the same uniform. There is no distinction between the two of you. There's actually scientific proof that what we wear actually, controls our emotions, how we feel and how we act. You know the saying, look good, feel good. Get that one? So that is actually what happens. Now let's take it back to my beginning statement. Modesty is a hard issue. In our childhood, we experience so many things that cause harm to us and cause a lot of things. And through them, we're able to create a lens of how we see the world. But the problem is a lot of people, once they go through the pains, they don't actually want to sit down and reflect on why they felt those certain things and how these things impact them. And that is where the problem starts, by not wanting to reflect. Let's say there's a girl who, is a bit chubby and she goes to school and every child always says, you are fat. And then she tells herself, like, I'm going to ignore them, right? And so she ignores them, but somehow, subconsciously, she starts eating less. And so she loses the weight. Then once she loses all the weight, someone says, you don't look toned, you just look like meat. And so she joins the gym and then she gets toned. And someone says, well, you don't particularly look strong or athletic. You just look like a random person who doesn't even go to the gym. So she gets on steroids. And then after that, another person is like, you look strong, but you don't look proportional. Then she goes and gets plastic surgery. And so this cycle will continue on and on, right? So I want you to realize that all of these things could have not happened to her if she could have just asked herself a question. Why did this comment from this other children hurt me? And how can I grow? And how can I counteract this lie or this thing? Because I see that it hurts me, so obviously it's not right. So how can I make it right? Because she has now asked herself those questions, she's now supposed to look for a biblical truth and say, well, but I'm fearfully and wonderfully God made, and God made me in his image. That means I am perfect because God made me perfectly. You see, so that way she was going to be able to counteract that problem. But because she didn't ask those questions, then she was unable to counteract those problems. The minute you start reflecting on why certain things have brought you pain or discomfort or grief, that is the moment you've won the battle against the enemy. Because the Bible says God is closer to the brokenhearted. You have to allow yourself to be broken and to feel those things, because that is where God is going to come in and help you and give you his truth. But when you do not reflect, you find yourself building up those pains, and they were going to build up, and your subconscious wants you to actually reflect. But because you deny that reflecting, then you start saying, oh, well, I'll just do this differently. And that's how you subconsciously try to prove others wrong. Yet there was nothing to ever prove wrong. You were always perfect. When I see people talking about modesty and being told to wear more modestly, I always saw people being defensive, like, no, why should you tell me what to wear? I can wear how I want, and you're not gonna tell me this is my body, all of this. And I thought to myself, why are they always so defensive? And I realized in that moment that their pain has now become their identity. Because now this thing is their identity, they have to defend their identity. Because when you're telling them wear more modestly, you are actually saying remove that whole identity. And they cannot remove that, because that's where their self-esteem and self-confidence and everything about themselves lies in, whether they realize it or not. We cannot try to differentiate our inner selves from our outer selves. What is in on the inside of you, those pain and those things will always show and reveal themselves one way or the other. And if you have peace and you have love and all these things, it will always reflect, because your inner self and your outer self are one thing. In Mark chapter 5 verse 28, we read about the woman who had the issue of the blood. If only I may touch his clothes, I shall be made well. The power wasn't magically in Jesus' clothing. Jesus' clothing didn't have any power, but her faith made her realize the inner man and the outer man are of one thing. If she can just touch the clothing, then she will receive the power that lies within Jesus. Another example is in Matthew chapter 26 verse 65, which says, then the high priest tore his clothes, saying he has spoken blasphemy. The high priest had so much internal grief within him that he had to tear off his clothing, because what is inside, remember, has to correlate with what is outside. When you wear a certain way and behave a certain way that is not aligned with God, yet you call yourself Christian, and when people come to you and treat you in a certain way and you become upset, you're like, no, why would you think I'm that? I'm not that. I'm actually a Christian and I'm actually a believer. You cannot get mad because you are the one who has the problem. You want to be a God child, but you also want to be the world's child. And this is why God says he does not dwell in a divided heart, because you cannot ever serve the world and serve God. In Revelation chapter 16 verse 15, it says, behold, I am coming as a thief. Blessed is he who watches and keeps his garments, lest he walks naked and they see his shame. Here Jesus is literally telling us that we have to keep our garments on, because when we do not keep those garments on, we are now going to walk in shame. So it is very important for us as Christians to wear the full armor of God. The Bible says wear the full armor of God, so that we can always present ourselves as holy. God is actually very, very interested in how we wear and how we present ourselves, because that represents him as well. I want you to realize this. In the Garden of Eden, the serpent's main aim was to remove the humans from God's veil, which is the covering of God, so that he may be able to enter you. If you have the covering of God, the enemy can never enter through you. Once that covering was removed, they now started to see their nakedness. But interestingly, they were always naked, yet because now their eyes were open, they could see their shame and the guilt that they had. Because when we see ourselves with our worldly eyes, we try to cover our shame. That's why they took those fig leaves. But the problem was never that they were naked. The problem was now that they no longer had the divine covering. So they were supposed to run towards God and say, God, we have done wrong unto you. Redeem us, O Lord. And the Lord would have come to them and given them back that covering. But yet they denied that opportunity. When we read Matthew chapter 6 verse 28 and 30, it says, so why do you worry about clothing? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow, they neither toil nor spin. And yet I say to you that even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. Now if God so clothes the grass of the field, which today is and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, will he not much more clothe you, O ye of little faith? Those who have deep faith in the Lord will always feel securely clothed, because they view themselves within God's divine eyes. And so because they view themselves the way that God views them, they also present themselves the way God sees them too. But those who view themselves in a worldly way will always interpret themselves in their sinful nature, and so the body will always reflect that sinful nature that they are viewing themselves within. And that's how you find yourself looking for the immodest things, because your sin wants you to cover it up. For me, growing up, my mom had very strict rules on how I wore, and that created a very, basic foundation for me to always be like, oh, I have to wear this way and this way. And I didn't understand why, but I just knew that this is just how I'm supposed to wear. And it was very different from other children. And it oftentimes upset me. And I was like, why can't I wear like them? But she would always emphasize that wear like this, right? As I grew up and I went to varsity and all these things, I wanted to look like others because now I'm like, oh, I'm out of my mom's house. I can look like everyone. And so there was, I wore everything that others wore. And people reacted well to it in that, they would always give me compliments. Oh, you're so beautiful. You're so this. And in my carnal way of thinking, I thought, oh, wow, this is beautiful. Until one day I read Proverbs chapter 31, verse 30, which says, charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. And that's when I realized, well, all these compliments I'm getting, they're kind of always based on the outer self. I realized that they're always laced with lust, with charm and envy and all these things. And I thought to myself, that means I'm not a woman of God, because it says, oh, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. When you are being given compliments in a worldly way, that is not praise unto the Lord, it is praise unto you. So instead of people praising the God in you, they're praising you in God. And it goes back to the beginning statement that I made. As I was like battling through these thoughts, one day I was sitting with a stranger, and this person says, a woman's body, a woman's stomach is so special. It carries life, and and life is such a sacred thing. So I'm always deeply saddened when I see a woman showing their stomach unto others, because according to my knowledge, everything that is sacred is kept away and it is treated in a special way. And in that moment, I was so convicted, and I thought to myself, my stomach is always out. And that's when I realized that God says that I'm precious to Him. That means I have to present myself in a precious way. But yet, the very precious body that He has given me, I am showing it to everyone, really so. And that means now that that means my temple is no longer a perfect sanctuary for the Lord, but it is broadcasted to everyone to defile with their eyes and to lust after. And I realized there needs to be a change. One day I decided, I'm gonna wear a modest outfit. And so I wore this long skirt and this long jersey, and I went out, and for the first time in my life I was walking, and someone was like, oh, a beautiful woman of God, may you pray for me as you go to church that I may come to know the Lord. And the excitement that came within me, I cannot even explain it. And I thought, wow, I just wore a long skirt. I didn't even think much about it. But yet someone was able to see me without even me speaking. They were able to even want to praise the Lord. From that day on, I realized that my clothes actually do matter, and how I present myself towards the world actually matters, because that is how they will come to see the Christ within me. I want to give you a final analogy, which is the books that we used in school. They would give us books and we would have to cover them. Then you would have to paste this little sticker and you write your name and the subject. The cover represents protection. So the cover actually protected the book and kept the pages not to be torn and everything else. And you writing the subject told the teacher or yourself even of what exactly lies within that book. So once the teacher opens it, or once you open it, they knew exactly what they were going to find. So it's the same thing with us. Your clothing, when you cover yourself fully, you're not actually hiding anything, you're protecting yourself. And the subject, the way you speak and the way you behave, tells us what lies within you. So you cannot now say you are a Christian, but yet your behavior and the way you wear differs from that, because those are indication of what lies within you. So modesty is not very much. So modesty all comes down to what lies within your heart. This requires us to always ask a question when we wear clothes. Am I glorifying God, or am I just wanting others to praise me? Thank you for watching. If you've come up to this far, can you please like and like and subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate it so much. Thank you. Bye.